Hello everyone, and this is the Octane version of the hairy Houdini training. So how to render hair and fur in Octane. Now the one issue or the one really big issue with Octane is that it doesn't have a hair shader. So I basically figured out a way to build a relatively decent hair shader that can sort of match what you get with Redshift, but you can get it relatively close. Like it's not 100%, but it's about 80-85%. So it looks fairly decent. Okay, so the one thing is you need to be working in Octane 4 for two reasons. Firstly, it's like loading times are a lot faster, and secondly, we'll be using the universal shader to build the proper hair shader in the end, and that is only available in Octane 4. So if you're on Octane 3.07 or 3.08, it's not recommended. You might not be able to follow this particular tutorial. Alright, so before you start, you need to do a couple of things. The first thing is you need to apply the Octane object parameters and turn on render curves / fur object in the tabs. Okay, so that will let you render this. The second is this is in general applicable to fur rendering across the board, whether you're like regardless of whichever renderer you're using. So if you're doing fur and you needed to pick up a texture from your base geometry, like it needs to pick up essentially it needs to pick up UVs from base geometry. So what you need to do is on my test rubber toy, I do have UVs. Like I have UVs over here. So if I want to check them out, let me just do left and right. And so those are the UVs for my test rubber geometry. And in order to transfer them to your hair and fur, what you need to do is fairly simple. If you come to the hair generate, like the final hair generate, and when you plug in your skin geometry, okay, like in the first input you put in your skin geometry, there is an option in the second tab. Like you have the general tab and you have the attributes and appearance tab. And in the attributes and appearance tab at the bottom, you have the option to transfer attributes. So what you need to do is you need to come to the vertex attribute in the source attribute transfer and just type in UV. By default, it should give you like a drop down list, but it's not. I'm on version 17.0.352 and which was the first production build. Like I haven't upgraded since then because it's not giving me any issues. But yeah, like you don't get a drop down list. So if you don't, you just type in UV and it'll work. Like you'll notice, like if you look at the attributes here, it goes to primitive level and you'll see like there's an attribute called UV over there. All right, that's basically it. Like you don't need to do anything else beyond that. Now the one nice thing about like let me just do one thing. I'm going to lower the hair count a little bit, so hopefully it's a little bit visible. Okay, and let me just make this thicker. So my setup is already done. What I have is I have a simple HDR which I have assigned. I'll put the HDR along with the file. The file won't be available for download on YouTube. The file will be available for download via Gumroad. So anybody who has purchased the Hairy Houdini training, once I've finished recording and done everything, in a few days I'll upload the zip file with the Houdini file and the textures on Gumroad, and you'll get a notification like new files have been added to the product and you can download. So you'll get a notification once that is done, hopefully by the end of this week. All right, so yeah, so I have an HDR assigned. I'm on basic path tracing, but it's like a depth of 3, so it's not too much. Actually, we can keep it at a depth of 2 as well. That should be fine. All right, and I've made a basic material. I've called it fur, which just has a glossy shader in it. And if I hit render, we should get like the basic fur. See, there you go. And let me just rotate the HDR a little bit. So yeah, I can come to transform and yeah, so one of the nice things about Octane is now usually when render engines generate hair and fur, they're usually like flat ribbons, they're not cylinders. And what happens is that within the shader, it does like a trick and it bends normals along the edges and which makes it look like a cylinder. Like you do have an option in some render engines where you can say, generate as a tube and it'll generate a tube, but usually it generates a flat ribbon. So which is why if you assign like a standard shader, you don't get speculars very well because it's basically just a flat plane. The nice thing about Octane is that even though it doesn't have a hair shader, it essentially renders the hair as cylinders, which you can see here. Like this is a standard this thing, and you can see it's rendering it as cylinders, like it's not a flat plane. So which is why even though we don't have a hair shader, because it's rendering as cylinders, you can you get the speculars and everything to a decent degree. So just to sort of do that over here, just to give you like a general idea, is if I get the diffuse to black, and you can see you get some pretty decent speculars overall, which if this was like flat planes, you wouldn't get speculars very well. Okay, so I'm going to do two files. Like the first one we'll just do like basic fur, and in the second one we'll do like proper hair. The one thing that you need to do is, if you're doing fur, is you want to apply a texture to it. So which is why setting up the UVs was very important. So the rest of it is fairly simple. Like you don't need to do much. If you just take any particular texture, and I'll load up a texture. Again, I'll add this. This is like a flower pattern. I'll add this into the final file. And if you just plug it into diffuse and hit update, and there you go. Okay, like if I increase the gamma a little bit, see, you can see the texture on your fur. And if let's say if I do a color correct, and I can just try to invert it. Yeah, there you go. So that's how you can do textures. It's not, particularly complicated. The other thing you can do with Octane is that it does allow you can't do random colors. Like that's a limitation. But what you can do is you can do color based on hair length. So what you can do is if you just type in W, you'll get something called tool W coordinate. And if you just directly plug it into diffuse, you'll be able to see there you go. You're getting color based on length. And if you plug this through a gradient or a ramp and plug that in there, then you get essentially, so if I set this to some color, see, so you can set this to, so you can do color based on hair length. Okay. And then if you want to multiply these two together, we can multiply these two together. I'll desaturate this so it's black and white, but there you go. Okay. So if you want to do basic stuff like that, you can do that much fairly easily. All right. So this is as far as basic, fur is concerned. But the more important stuff is trying to do hair. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll open up a hair file. I'll open up one of the files where we had done hair. So I'll just save this. Yeah, I have a second setup, but I'll just build it again from scratch. All right, so this is my hair scene. Okay, so this is basically what I have. Yeah, so let's just set this up. So what I have is I've assigned a basic shader. I have the same HDR as before, so that really hasn't changed. Let me just change the angle of it. It's looking pink right now because there's no shader in there. Okay, so let me just, wow, this is really bright. Hold on. Yeah, let me just spin this around a little bit. Yeah, I think that's a good enough angle. Okay. All right, so the way I kind of figured it out was hair essentially is two levels of specular, right? So one is the hair color itself, and then you have a secondary specular layer on top of it. So, and the first one is usually colored. So whatever is the hair color is the color of your specular. And then the second is generally white. So it's essentially like a layered shader. And you can do that fairly easily with the universal material. The only thing you need to figure out is the color of the hair. And once you can figure that out, or once you work that out, you just save that color and it works like every single time. So what you do is you take a universal material and we'll plug it in, and there you go. So what you need to do is you essentially start off by building a metal shader. Okay, so just take the albedo, and what I've done is I've saved these colors. And what I'll do is I'll write the RGB values of some of these in a notepad file, and I'll attach it with the Octane zip file. So when you sort of open it, you should be able to recreate the same colors. Anyway, so let's say if we start off with the first one, and what you want to do is make it metallic, and there you go. Okay, it gives you like a fairly decent base value, and get your roughness up to something like about 0.35. And that gives you a relatively decent place to start off with. Okay, and then the second thing you want to do is then you want to give it like a secondary reflection. So you take your coating value and you bring it up to 1, and that gives you like a secondary reflection value, and you get the coating reflection up to something like 1.7. And there you go. Okay, so that gives you like a fairly, decent hair shader. Okay, like without having to do too much. Now, one of the things, as I said, like one of the things you can't do with Octane directly is you can't do random hair color. So one of the ways to do it is that you can, if you come into the hair shader, now this is an either or situation. Like either you can do the random hair color or you can pick up a texture for fur. Okay, because it sort of writes into the UV map. Like hopefully in a few months there should be like full attribute support, because right now Octane does support attributes in beta level, but it's only for mesh. It doesn't work for hair or particles. So hopefully once that comes in, this method won't be required. But yeah, like right now you need to do it. Okay, so what you need to do is let's first delete the base color that we have. Okay, like whatever color we have right now, I'm just going to get rid of that. So, sorry, not delete, take an attribute delete, and we'll get rid of, yeah. Okay, and then I'm going to take a warp, and we'll take an attribute warp, but we want to affect primitives, because the hair has to be, the color has to be at primitive level. All right, so the one thing before I set this up is if you want to do like good looking hair, okay, the idea is to keep the hair thickness fairly low, and you need to increase the hair count to a fairly, high amount. So like as you can see here, my hair thickness is about like 0. whatever, like 0004, and my hair count is at about 450,000. It's not exactly 450,000, but you kind of go pretty high. So that's the trick. Right, like if you try to keep the thickness high and the hair count low, it doesn't look very good. So you want to keep like the thickness fairly low and the hair count really high. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll just take like a random node, and I'm going to take a point number, plug that in there and plug it into CD, and you'll get like random colors. And then what you need to do is you come into Octane, into the fur tab, and just say pack color to UV map. So you'll get like, primitive color attribute in CD. Okay, so if I hit render now, and what I can do is if I come into the shopnet, sorry, wrong shader. Yeah, okay. And let's just take a glossy shader for the time being. So if you have the Octane setup, you'll get a specific texture map. Okay, like pick up the RGB version of it, and you'll get a texture map called RGB 4K map.ppm. Like this comes with the Octane folder when you install it. And if you just take that and you plug it into diffuse, it will pick up the color from, the base geometry. And then I can use this to do basic, randomization. So if I just plug it through like a color correction, okay, and I can adjust the gamma to make it like brighter or darker, and maybe also adjust, the contrast. And then maybe I can like, multiply this with the hair color to get some amount of variation, or you can also do it through a gradient. So if I just take a tool gradient and let's say I plug that in, So if I can just, do something like that. So yeah, so let's just set this up. So if I have like the basic hair color, okay, and then I want a little bit of randomization in there, so I can probably do like a multiply. Okay, so I'll just take I'll take an RGB color and I'll pick up the same value and plug that into albedo. So you'll have the same color, and then I can take a multiply and let's take this. Yeah, let's get rid of that. Don't need it. And I can just plug it in here. Yeah, see, so you get like random colors. But what we can do is I can just take like, instead of going to full black, I can do like a gray over there. Yeah, so you get like a little bit of randomization. Okay, so this is, and then if we just take the color and you change it to anything else, you'll get, so you want to do like blonde hair, like relatively lighter blonde hair, or you want to do, like fairly dark hair. So yeah, so these colors, I kind of just experimented and it finally worked. So I kind of just stayed with these. Okay, now along with this, because the hair is fine enough, you can actually, you get transmission fairly easily. Like if I just move it around to the back, you have like a little bit of light coming through. Let me just see what my bounce value is. Okay. But if you want to get like proper light bounce coming through, we need to do a little bit of transmission. So what you want to do is, we need to do a little bit of layering. Like you don't have a choice here. Let me just take the color and make it, yeah, okay. Okay, so what you do is you take a diffuse and get the diffuse color to black and put in this color into transmission. So you'll get, like a little bit of, you can see the light sort of bleeding through. But if you want it brighter or darker, we can put it through a color correction and just get the gamma a little low. So get the gamma to about 0.5. So you'll get, like a little bit of, so whatever color we pick up here, it will keep adjusting accordingly. So if we go to blonde, so you'll see like, color sort of bleeding in that way. And what you want to do is you want to mix these two, but you mix it based on the hair length. So only where, like only on the tips of it, we should get the transmission and the rest of it should be normal. So what we can do is we can just take a mix material and pick up the diffuse and let's just check this. Okay, so I'm just going to take another glossy shader and, let's make this blue. So I can just see the difference and plug that in there. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't update automatically. Yeah. Okay, so you can see like a little bit of the color bleeding through. But what you do is just take a W coordinate again and plug it in through a gradient ramp. Yeah, see. So now what's happening is you're getting the major colors at the tips and then you're not getting anything towards, the center. And what we can do is we can kind of control that. So it's fairly, sort of specific. Yeah, see, so you're getting, your color sort of coming in over here. And then just replace the glossy shader with the universal material. And there you go. Okay, so if I kind of spin it around and let me just try to increase. Yeah, there you go. See, so if you increase the gamma, there, now you can see the color sort of coming through. So if we rotate it, so you get, a fairly decent looking hair shader. Yeah, with, transmission. And then as I said, like you can, whatever color you pick up, because all of it is coming in through, like you don't need to worry about this anymore. Like this is the only one that you need to worry about. Okay, like this is just the main color. And whatever color you pick up over here is, the result that you get. So whether you have like slightly reddish hair or, standard brown hair, you still get, it gives you a variation on that color bleeding through the hair. Alright, so this is how you can build a fairly decent hair shader in Octane. Okay, so mostly as I said, is the basic setup is very simple. You make a metallic shader and you give it a secondary coat, and that's basically it. Like that will get you to a fairly decent level, and then you can, if you want transmission, then you mix it with a diffuse shader, but it's not too complicated. So as I had mentioned, once I've finished recording all the 4 training videos for rendering, I'll upload the Houdini files to Gumroad, and you'll get a notification and you can download it then. Okay. So as I said, like hopefully in the next couple of days. So yeah, that's basically it.